Hello and welcome to the first video on this channel. Now today I'm going to talk about RecyclerView and try to explain it in the most basic and easy to understand way. Because a lot of developers that I've talked to or read their blogs or watched their videos mention that RecyclerView is one of the key components in developing an Android application, one of the most, well not most, but one of the complex subjects to talk about and to work on. So this video is going to serve as a reference to what it is, how to make it in the fastest possible way, and to actually know what you're doing without just copy and pasting lines of code. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into it. So here I have Android Studio 3.1. You can use any other version as long as it's 3 and above. And we're going to create a new Android Studio project. We're going to call it RecyclerView Basics, let's say. Make sure to include Kotlin support, otherwise it's going to compile it as Java. I'm going to go next. I've chosen API 21. You can choose any of them. Since it doesn't really matter how much percentage of the device is going to cover. And we're going to choose an empty activity. And this here we're going to remain as is. We're going to generate a layout file and just click Finish. There we go. The project is created. Now, in a sentence or two, I'm just gonna, what is RecyclerView? Well, each Android application is actually made out of, few key components. One of those components is RecyclerView. Now, almost every application has some kind of lists. Now, back in the day, those lists were made out of list views, which was good. Well, it really wasn't. So they made RecyclerView. What RecyclerView does is that it shows rows or items that are only on the screen and a few additional extra upwards and downwards. So when the user scrolls, all those items that are off the screen the longest are going to be recycled, and they're going to be passed in as the ones that are being scrolled onto the screen. Therefore, it recycles the views, and it doesn't have any performance issues or memory issues. And it's really sort of like a standard to use when it comes to any kind of lists. Now, the project is created, and now we're going to code along. So, first thing I'm going to do is to add a RecyclerView to our layout in the activity main, and we're going to, since we cannot leave it empty, we need to add our own custom row. That a custom row is when you open up a Facebook application or Instagram application, each post is that custom row in that RecyclerView. So just like that, we're going to create our own item row, and for today's basics, we're just going to add a picture, and we're going to add a person's name and person's profession or title or whatever. So in the activity underscore main.xml, we're going to add RecyclerView. And we have this hello world text view. We kind of don't need it, so we're going to delete it. And here we have RecyclerView. Click it, drag it to the center of the screen, and it's going to add the library now. Click OK. It's going to add the dependency to the Gradle. It's going to resync the project, and it's going to add RecyclerView to our layout. There we go. Gradle is finished building or syncing the project. And here we have our RecyclerView. Now, you will notice up here and here is, or next to our RecyclerView, it says this view is not constrained. How to fix that really easily is click on your RecyclerView. Since we're not going to have any sort of custom dimensions and constraints due to layouts, since it's going to be all fixed, here we have this sort of like a magic wand that it says Infer Constraints. Click it, and what this does is going to create constraints on its own, sort of to proportion onto the screen. And since the RecyclerView here is going to take the entire screen, it's perfect. So since we cannot leave the RecyclerView here empty, excuse me, first things first, click on RecyclerView, and we're gonna add it ID, so it says RecyclerView main, right? So the next thing what we're gonna do in regards to the layout is we're going to create our custom row, since we don't want to leave RecyclerView empty. So expand the app, expand the res, and on layout, right click, new layout resource file. Root element is going to be constrained layout, perfect. And we're going to call this user underscore row. There we go. Click OK. And here's when I'm going to create our user row. Next thing what we're going to do is we're going to add a profile image, person's name, and profession. So here we have image view. Click it, drag it here, and it's going to pop up this resources folder. We're going to choose our own image. We're going to expand project, and we're going to choose IC Launcher Round. And here on the right side, we're going to have fixed width and height. So let's say 70 dp. There we go. Now again, same thing as with the RecyclerView, it doesn't have any constraints. So we're going to add them by clicking here. We have this sort of circle that blinks green. Click it and drag upwards. So it's going to constrain it to the top view of our parent, and we're going to constrain it to the left, and also zoom out, and we're going to constrain it to the bottom. Now what we're going to do, since we don't want this entire screen to be our item row, we need to shrink it down. So how are we going to do that? So click on constrain layout, and here under the layout height, instead of match parent, click wrap content. So now only this single row is going to appear instead of the full screen one. Next thing we're going to add is text view here. Constrain it to the top, and the left one constrained to the image view on its right side. We're going to remove the text, and right below the text you have this sort of like a paintbrush. That's sort of the text that it's going only to appear in our Android Studio, and that text is not going to be visible when we actually create an application. So here we're going to have like John Smith, which is the name. So this text that has the brush here, it's only going to appear here. We're going to change its text size to, let's say, 18 SP, and we're going to set it to bold. There we go. We're going to add another text view right below. Its upside constrained to the bottom of our name, and its left side constrained to the left side of our text view. And here we're going to remove 8 and set it to 0, so both name and profession are going to be aligned. So again, remove the text from here, and I'm going to say graphic designer, for instance, and I'm going to set it to italic. There we go. Now what I forgot, and what you shouldn't, is to add IDs, since we're going to use them later on in the video. So for the name, text view, we're going to say name text view, and click yes. This is going to update all the XML references. And for the profession, let's say title text view. There we go. Now what we created is a single row which is going to be displayed in our RecyclerView. Close it, and here's a neat trick. Click on your RecyclerView in the activity underscore main, and here you have an option called list item that has again this paintbrush. What this does, it's going to display your custom item row. In our case, it's going to be user row just in this editor. So you can kind of see, so click on these three dots, find your user row, and click OK. So you can see in the editor how your RecyclerView is going to look like. There you go. And that's for the layout part of this RecyclerView creation. The next thing what we're going to do is add a linear layout manager, and I'm going to add an adapter. So linear layout manager, actually layout manager is what fills out our recycler view. And the adapter helps us to define where we want to attach our custom row, what data we want to pass in, and what views we want to change, which we will see later on. So open your activity, main activity.kt, and we're going to reference our recycler view with its ID. So recycler view main. There we go. Question mark dot to, if it's potentially nullable. And I'm going to say layout manager is equal to linear layout manager. There we go. And in parentheses, we're going to pass the context, which is this. There we go. And the next thing we need to pass in is the adapter. So let's say RecyclerView main adapter is equal to, and we're going to call it like main adapter. It's going to go red since we don't have this class. So Alt Enter, create class, and choose the second option, which is going to create it right below our main activity class. And it extended RecyclerView adapter since it is adapter. And here in these parentheses that has an asterisk in it, we're going to pass a view holder. Now, view holder allows us to access each view on our layout. Now, in our case, we have a picture, profile picture, which we're not going to use in this video, but we have a name view, name text view, and we have a profession or title text view. So we're going to pass here, or let's say custom view holder. Now again, the custom view holder is going to go red. So Alt Enter here and create class custom view holder. I'm going to create it on the main activity level. There we go. Click on next to the parentheses, Alt Enter, remove, actually clean up code. It's going to remove these parentheses. What we're going to do here at the custom view holder, open parentheses and type val view colon view, and make sure to import android.view. All right. Now custom view holder is going to extend from RecyclerView dot view holder, and we need to pass in the argument, which is going to be of type view, which is right here. There we go. That's it for our custom view holder class. Now open up parentheses at the main adapter, and we need to implement members. That's why it's giving us this error here. So Alt Enter on the class, implement members, hold Shift and arrow down to mark all 3 of those, and hit Enter. We're going to remove these to do things. There we go. Now on create view holder method, we're overriding it, and what it does, it's giving us a way to say to what recycler view are we attaching our custom view. Get item count is going to return the total number of views that we need to show. We can pass in a fixed number, which we're going to do now, and later on we can pass in the size of something else. And on bind view holder, now this one is going to access, I don't think the access is actually the word, it's going to access each individual view that we have, which is in our case is going to be the name and title, so we can change it later on if we want to. So first things first, let's work on create view holder. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say val, I'm going to have a custom layout, so let's say custom layout is equal to, now how do we do this? How do we inflate layout? Well, we use layout inflator. So type in layout inflator dot, and we need to pass in the context, so dot from, in the parentheses we're going to say parent, which is passed as an argument here, dot context dot, and next thing is what we're going to want to inflate. We want to inflate our custom row, so hit inflate, and I'm going to say our dot layout dot user row. So this is our user row. The second parameter is the view group, which is the parent, and the third parameter is attached to root, which we don't want, so just say false. Here we go. We can replace this with a doc call. Great. What we need to do now is return this custom layout. How do we do that? So type return custom view holder, and in the parentheses type custom layout. There we go. Now get item count. We can do this easy way. So remove the colon, the type, the return type, and the parentheses, and just say equals, let's say 10. Now, like if your function has only a return value, you can just remove those parentheses and just type equals, and that what is actually returning. Now, let's run this. I'm going to start up our emulator, and what we should see is our custom RecyclerView with our custom item, and we're going to have 10 of these. So hit OK. I'm running Nexus 6, and this is going to take time, so by the time this loads, I'm going to continue on. So emulator loaded up, took its sweet time. Now first thing you'll notice is we don't have our name and our title. The reason why we don't have them is because we didn't set the text on our layout to be those. We just set the text for the editor to represent the name and the title. That's why these are empty, you cannot see them. Don't worry, we'll fix it. We'll fix it. Now, as you can see, we have our RecyclerView items, 10 of them, because we set the get item count to 10. And here we have it. Now, this is great. This is the basic part of it, but it's not doing much. How about we create something else? How about we just sort of make it a little bit more, let's say, dynamic? So what we can do here is I'm going to create a new, actually in our main activity, right below our custom view holder class, we're going to create a data class, which is going to represent every single, person or user. So right below custom view holder, I'm going to say data class person, open up parentheses, and here we're going to have a name, and we're going to have a profession. Now, I would like to provide some sort of like an emergency default values just in case nothing else gets printed out or shown. So we're gonna have some default values just in case of emergency. So let's see, val name is gonna be of type string, and set it to equal to John Smith, comma, val, let's say title is gonna be of type string equal to graphic designer. Beautify the code or make it more normal. Now, what we just did is we created a data class called person, and here in the constructor we passed in the name, which is going to be of type string, and its default value, if we cannot print the name, it's going to print out John Smith, since it's a default value. And here we did the same for the title. So title is of type string, and we passed in graphic designer as a default value. So if we don't have any title for people, if we don't want to provide the title, it's going to go back to the default one. So in our onCreate class, right below our main adapter, actually not below, but in between, we're going to say val people is going to be equal to array list of type person, and we need to pass in parentheses as a constructor. Now we're going to say people dot add, I'm going to say person. Now if we just pass in the person just like this, we will not have any issues. Why? Because here in, like I said, in our constructor for the person class, we passed in the default values. So if we don't pass anything, it's gonna come back to these. So we can just, like, if you want to, you can pass just the name. If you want to, you can just pass the title. You can pass both or none. which is a pretty cool thing in regards to the Kotlin. So, but we want to, leave this one empty. So let's say people.add, let's say person, and I'm going to say, I don't know, Ted Mosby as a name. If we want to, we can say people.add, I'm going to say person, let's say, I don't know, Jane Smith. She's a software developer. You say people.add person, and we can say here title is equal to I don't know, CEO. Actually, it's going to need to be string, so it's going to be CEO. What we did here is we just accessed the title here, so we don't need to put in the name, right? We can duplicate this. So Control D. There we go. Jane, Jack, Donovan, Eric, Brown, I don't know. Ash, Dean, something. It doesn't really matter, right? And what we're going to do now is, in our adapter, we're going to pass in people. So we can say people. Now we're going to have an error here. It says the main adapter doesn't have anything passed here as its constructor. So I'm going to say val person is going to be a type of array list of person. There we go. And now we have no issues there. Now what we can do now is, instead of passing 10, we can say person.size. And now it's only going to show us the number of people that we passed here, which is great. We can also make this private, so Alt-Enter, make person private. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to assign all these values that we passed in here for the name and the title to the corresponding name text views and title text views. So how are we going to do that? In the onBindViewHolder method, we're going to first dereference the position of the person. So I'm going to say val person, or actually people, let's call it people, is equal to person, and in these parentheses pass in position. So now we have position of not position, but the position of each of these elements in the person class. So the next thing we'll do is tab holder, which is here, custom view holder dot view dot name text view, and we're accessing the name text view dot text is equal to people dot, and you can see here right at the top we have name and the title, so dot name. So we're accessing the name here that we passed as a constructor in the person class. And the next one, we're going to say holder dot view dot title text view dot text. Again, we're accessing the text, or setting the text to be more precise to our corresponding text views, and I'm going to say people dot title. There we go. Now let's rerun our application on our emulator and let's see what happens. I'm going to select Nexus 6, which is already running. There we go. All right, so emulator loaded up, and as you can see, we have several items in our recycler view, and each of these is corresponding to the values we passed here. So for instance, for the Ted Mosby, we just passed in the name, and graphic designer is set by default. We also have the empty person, which is referring back to its default parameters. So we have John Smith, which is graphic designer. And let's say the last one was, we set the title to be CEO, and we have John Smith, the default value, and the CEO. Now, this is much more powerful because unlike the previous basic example, this one is much more dynamic and you can add so many things. In this example, we just added the name and we added the profession. We didn't change the profile picture, which you can. We're going to talk about that sometimes later on. We're going to use Picasso for smoother and faster loading of the images. But for this basic example, this is pretty much it. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to clean up our code a little bit because this is getting way too messy. So go down first of all to the person class, click on the name person, Alt Enter, and move person to separate file. There we go. Now we have a person KT file. This is just our model class, which is great. Next thing, we're going to move the main adapter also to a separate file. Just make sure once you move the adapter to also include custom view holder class right below here. There we go, we're going to import the view. Otherwise, it's going to have all these errors and so on and so forth. And we're left here with onCreate, which is much more cleaner and simple. Now again, to summarize what we've learned so far, because this video is getting way too long, we created Layout Manager for RecyclerView. Now the RecyclerView main is the ID of the RecyclerView, which we added to our layout. And we've added a Layout Manager, which is responsible to filling out our RecyclerView. We used Linear Layout Manager. Now we also have a Grid Layout Manager, which is going to display each item in a grid form, or we can have our own custom Layout Manager. The next thing what we did is we created a variable called people, and we created an array list of person. Now person is our data class, and in the constructor we passed in the name and the title, and we also assigned them actually their default values. We assign default values as an emergency just in case we cannot print out the values we want. It's going to print out something like I said by default to the screen. So we always have some default values to go back to if all else fails. Now we've added several people. We gave them a name. We also, since we use default values, we can just pass in the class name. In the last one, we just passed in the title by saying title is going to be equal to something, so we reference the title. And the last but not least, we create an adapter, which is responsible to access the views and manipulating them and saying to what we want to attach our custom row to, and so on and so forth. So if we go to the main adapter, which is here, we created in a constructor, we created and passed in the array list of person class, so we can access all its elements. Now, main adapter is extending from adapter, and here we need to pass the custom view holder. Now, custom view holder is in charge to access each individual view. As you've seen, we have access to name text view and title text view. Now, otherwise it won't work unless we override certain methods. So we have three methods here. The first one is onCreateViewHolder, which is in charge of basically saying to what we want to attach our custom row to. So we're attaching to our RecyclerView main, and we have our own user row here, which we've created at the beginning of the video, and we are returning it, that our custom user row. The second method is getItemCount, which is returning the total size of the items that are needed to be passed into RecyclerView. Since we've created several of them, we can just reference it by saying person.size, and it's going to return all the size of the data that is passed as a person. And the last one is onBindViewHolder. Now this method is, I use it this way. I've seen a lot of people just using it in the custom view holder class. They reference it by finding views by ID, but I kind of like it this way. So what we did here is we've accessed the position, which is, in our case, we have position for name, we have position for title of each individual person, and we've sorted that into variable. and we said that holder.view.name text that is, we accessed each individual view on our user role layout, and we've set its text to be whatever we've defined here. So in our name case, we set people.name. So the position is going to go to the name, and we're going to set whatever the name was. Same goes for the title. And that's pretty much it for this tutorial. This is becoming a really, really long tutorial. I thought it was going to be really short and simple. Turns out it's not. Anyways, I hope this was sort of helpful video, that it was easy to follow along, and I hope you actually learned something from it. If you did, just comment down below if you want me to continue this series. I'm going to publish these things every other day in regards to Kotlin programming language with Android development, tips and tricks and so on and so forth. So nevertheless, if you enjoyed it, I'm glad you did, and I will see you in the next video.